23 minutes now before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Thursday morning. Robin, we have worked in talk radio for a long time now, but we haven't always worked in talk radio. We worked in music radio for quite a long time as well. And the one thing I want to mention that will apply to our next conversation is this, that at a music station, you typically have listeners who it's a different type of a listener in general. I'm not saying, I listen to both. When I'm in my car, I'll listen to talk radio. I'll also listen to music radio. So obviously, whatever I'm about to say is not a blanket statement for everybody. But in general, talk radio listeners are much more informed about what's going on in politics than in music radio listeners.
Oh, yeah, I think so, too.
I do think that music radio listeners also watch, like, late night TV. They watch Jon Stewart. They watch David Letterman or Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon. Anybody
Conan.
And some of those comics, what's his name? Not Johnny Carson did it some, and Jay Leno did it some. Once in a while, their comedy will be based on what's going on in the news politically.
Yeah.
And quite often, those political commentaries, they're satirical and actually drive a point home probably better than 3 hours of listening to a talk show host trying to make a point.
Oh, yeah.
The only problem is that if you are a music listener, and please, I'm not trying to make a blanket statement, but if you're not paying attention to the news, let me just put it that way, and the only opinion you're forming of what's going on in the news is from a joke.
Yeah.
And you say, gosh, that's right, isn't the president stupid? Or, gosh, that's right, isn't the vice president a knucklehead? We do that a lot because the jokes always usually are on one of those two guys. Or somebody else in high position.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we do develop these opinions based on jokes. It's not always such a good thing, and sometimes it's a very good thing. Sometimes it's very astute. Mark Twain was one of the, I guess I'm trying to think of who else in early history, some of the political cartoonists.
Oh, yeah, they were great.
Obviously used satire as a way to express their opinion and at the same time get a chuckle out of all of us. This is a fascinating topic, and I don't think I would have even thought of it in this way until I saw this topic on my list of topics. I don't think the book arrived, so I'm looking forward to it.
It's en route.
The book is called Is Satire Saving Our Nation? Sophia A. McClennen is on the phone. She wrote the book. She's a professor of international affairs and comparative literature at the Pennsylvania State University. She's a blogger for the Huntington Post, and looking forward to this conversation. Is satire saving our nation? Good morning, Sophia. How are you?
I'm all right. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, you're welcome. Where are you right now?
What's that?
Where are you?
I'm in my home office in State College, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Looking out at the lovely gray, cold skies.
Gray?
You guys have better weather than I do.
We want even just a little bit because that space shuttle, not space shuttle, what do you call it? That Orion thing still hasn't gone up yet.
Oh, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, so I miss Florida.
Oh, did you? Oh, really? Yeah. Well, Fort Lauderdale's even just, I guess, a notch better than our area. We're kind of north central Florida, so.
Right.
So how did this topic become of interest to you? This is an interesting observation that you're making. I don't know what your conclusions are. I guess we'll find that out. But I just love the idea that people who make a living making us laugh actually persuade us to have an opinion.
There's a lot of things that kind of converge to make satire play a significant role today in politics. One of the things that we happen to know, and you were mentioning it earlier, is that a lot of people are getting their political information from satire. And it used to be the case that we would really sweat that, thinking that can't be right? Satire should not be your first exposure to some of these issues. But what's happened is that the mainstream news media just isn't doing its job. And so much of what happens, for instance, on television news is so fluffy, sensationalist, and sometimes outright wrong that the satirists are doing a better job of covering. We have all of this research that shows that when the viewers of shows like The Colbert Report or The Daily Show score higher in knowledge of political information than viewers of Fox.
Oh, really? And you, actually, if you compare, let's see. There are those. Oh, who's the guy who's more of a conservative political? Miller, Dennis Miller.
Dennis Miller.
Yeah, he sort of does that. And if you were only watching him and listening to him, and being persuaded by his opinions, then you might have a different opinion than you would from somebody like Jon Stewart.
Yeah, no, okay, so that's an interesting observation. What we're finding from the research is that it's the viewers, specifically of the Colbert Report and the Daily Show, that really have the highest knowledge of political information, not a comedian like Dennis Miller. And that isn't because necessarily of the political perspective of Dennis. It's the way he does his satire, right? So both Colbert and Stewart give a lot of news clips, right? And so they actually give a lot of information, and then they also unpack that information for their viewers. And that's part of why their viewers know more.
Okay, and does that indicate that they are more perceptive?
You mean the comedians themselves?
Yeah. Does it indicate that I mean, I don't think it's a secret that comedians are usually very brilliant, even though they might come across even emo. What's his name? Emo Phillips. Emo Phillips is way smart. I mean, I saw an interview with this guy and I thought, wow, he comes across like a dummy, but he's not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, right. I mean, you don't want to make big generalizations. Satire is a specific kind of comedy, and satirists tend to be extremely sharp, right? Because they like wordplay, they pay attention to detail. That's where their jokes come from. So they tend to be bright. But, again, as soon as I say that, someone will come up with one that wasn't smart.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But the way they do things, the way they present themselves, is they're not really telling their opinion. They're just making an observation, one way or the other, either how brilliant it was or how much of an idiot the person was on the decision that was handed down. So that's another thing that I think that people will pay attention to them, is because that does give the person watching a way to form their own opinion.
No, that was a brilliant observation. I could have used that quote in my book. The thing is that this is what makes satire so uniquely valuable to democracy, right? Is that the satirist never says what he or she thinks. They point out the folly and the stupidity and the disappointment, and they let the audience draw conclusions. Whereas a lot of, especially the cable news channels, Fox, MSNBC, and CNN, they just have...
Wait, are you still there, Sophia? Sophia, oh my goodness.
Open any space for the audience to think, right? And even if they have more than one perspective, the two perspectives just fight. So if you're watching, you tend to just become partisan as a consequence, not a critical thinker.
Yes.
And satire is about teaching you to think critically.
Oh, I love that.
Say, hey, what the hell? So that's a brilliant observation.
I love that.
That's the reason why satire is saving things for us, because that's where we're getting the critical thinking.
One of the attempts at satire that I think fails is when somebody puts together a video, and they did this to the president, and they did this to a local. We had a marijuana issue on the ballot, legalizing medicinal marijuana. The head of that whole movement was an attorney from Orlando. And rather than taking actual clips of him, if you're going to make fun of him and try to point out that you don't agree with him, you should have used actual clips. But what they did was they took clips and they mixed them with other clips to make it seem like he was a buffoon. But the truth is, it wasn't fair. It's not fair to do that. There was one horrible one of the president taking something totally out of context, and we're supposed to look at this and laugh, but it wasn't even funny. I mean, even if I disagree with the satirist on the point that they're trying to make, if it's funny, it's still funny.
Right. Well, there's an art, right? So this is where you're absolutely, totally spot on. The Republican Party tried to come out with some ads. You might have seen the Say Yes to the Stress ad that was meant to influence the Florida governor's race. And it was sort of suggesting that female voters would vote based on which dress they liked. It was meant to be satirical and funny, but it really fell flat, and the backlash from it was worse, right, than if there hadn't been any kind of ad like that at all. So So you have to have an art to it, and you have to be smart about it. So if it's heavy-handed, it tends not to be that funny too.
I love this conversation, by the way, Sophia. Thank you for doing this. I can't wait to see the book. It has not arrived yet, but when it does, I'll look at it and then I'll give it away to an audience member. We need to take a little break. Let me push some buttons here and do this. But we're back after the break with Sophia McClennen. The book is called "Is Satire Saving Our Nation?" I'm not so sure what the conclusion is yet. We'll find out when we come back. I'll take a guess that it is, and always has. That's my guess. We'll take a little break. Be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accidents. Fog early, otherwise partly sunny today. There may be a shower in spots along the coast, the high 77 to 81. Tonight, partly cloudy with a brief shower or two near the coast, low 60, well inland 67 on the coast. Tomorrow, more sun than clouds. Again, there can be a shower or two around during the afternoon hours, the high 77 to 81. For Saturday, clouds and some sun with an afternoon shower, high 77 to 81. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
News Talk 1370, WOCA invites you to discover your full business potential. News Talk Radio is the perfect environment for your advertising. WOCA's News Talk format pinpoints information-hungry, better educated, high-income adults. So use us to talk to them. Call 732-8000. 732-8000. We're Ocala News Talk Radio. News Talk 1370 WOCA.
Hey, I'm Gary. And I'm Eric. Did you know that Red Eye Radio is on WOCA The Source every night from 2 to 6 a.m. and it's live?
That's right. No tape shows here.
We know that the news doesn't sleep.
And neither do we. So we're here with you live from 2 till 6 a.m. every weekday. Call us 866-90-RED-EYE. So join me, Gary McNamara.
And me, Eric Harley, every weeknight to discuss the latest in news and entertainment.
Right here on WOCA The Source.
All right, 11 minutes now before 10 o'clock. By the way, before we return to Sophia McClennen, the launch of the Orion has been scrubbed, and they say they're going to try again tomorrow. So we were kind of hoping that we would see it, because you should be able to see it from here. It's a nice, beautiful, clear day. Hopefully it'll be clear tomorrow. You'll be able to see it take off. And I don't know why I like this one. As Galen asked me this morning, why is this one important to me? But it is. I don't know why. It's the second tallest rocket. The tallest was the one that launched the Apollo stuff, right?
Yes.
The second tallest, I think this is the second tallest. I think third tallest. Never mind. Sophia McClennen, we try to do satire. We're not as skilled at it as some of the others we've mentioned, but we do try and do it. Let me ask you something, though, about radio. We had, a long time ago, Alan Colmes was a host. We had as a syndicated host. And Alan Colmes had a liberal opinion, but he was a talker. He wasn't really a satirist. He then later on teamed up with Sean Hannity, being a conservative. Again, not a satirist, but a talker. So the two would go back and forth. I always thought that was a good idea, except for the fact that Hannity usually dominated it. It seemed like to me. And so you didn't really get the full. You got Alan Colmes was very kind of. Do you remember Alan Colmes by chance, Sophia?
No, I'm sorry.
No, okay. Well, he was, and still is, he's still out there, but he's kind of gentle, if you know what I mean. And Hannity can be very loud. Don't always agree with either one of them. But you would hear the same exact argument being done on something similar to, who's the guy who, I forgot his name. Who's the guy who looks like Howard, Hugh Hefner? Who's the Who?
You're not thinking of Jon Stewart, are you?
Not Jon Stewart. No, who's the guy that looks like Hugh Hefner? There's the guy that looks like Hugh Hefner. And anyway, but he's funny and makes points. I don't always agree with him, but I think when he's funny, he's funny. It is kind of weird, isn't it, that we find something funny. I'm never really totally offended by any of them. Once in a while, there might be somebody.
Do you think that the younger people of today, the people that are in their 20s, are formulating a better and more accurate opinions of the things that are going on in the political spectrum than the people in their 50s and 60s that are always drawing on the past?
That's the $1 million question. This is the part where when I give lectures at universities, it's always a little tense because the students love my answer in the faculty don't. The reality is that the millennial generation is a really amazing generation. And one of the things that's been unfortunate is that the news coverage of the generation is mostly inaccurate. So millennials do get a lot of their news from satire. They do get a lot of their news from social media. A lot of research has been done on this that started worrying, this can't be good, right? What are these kids doing, right? They're not sitting still. They're not reading newspapers. It can't be good. But what we know, in fact, is that it is good, and that this is a generation that when they get some sort of thing on their news feed on Facebook, they actually question whether it's true or not immediately. They're not the ones that are going to forward the crazy, chain spam email.
Thank goodness.
They know better than this.
Thank goodness.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're completely savvy and so they question information right away.
That's good.
Now, it means that they're more skeptical, but we're living in an age where we get bombarded with so much information that being skeptical is a good thing and helps them be smarter. So we have one of the things we do in the book that I think is really great is we talk about the generational gaps, and we talk about how the millennials, in fact, do get most of their political information from social media and satire, but that's actually a positive thing. The other exciting part is they create it, which isn't, something we can talk about. They're more active and involved than, say, the older generations that are more passive.
Sophia McClennen is our guest. She's a professor of international affairs and comparative literature at Pennsylvania State University. Up in Pennsylvania right now, just dealing with the cold, horrible Pennsylvania. I'm teasing.
25 degrees,
I'm teasing.
she said.
Her book is called
just rub it in.
Is Satire Saving Our Nation? So far, Sophia, we've talked about broadcast satire. What about print satire like National Lampoon or The Onion or those kinds of things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, we kind of highlight 10 satire moments since 9/11, and one of the ones we look at specifically is The Onion. The Onion has played a major role. Sadly, sometimes, your success leads, you get too successful that you can't stay as successful because people know what you're up to.
Yeah,
now
right.
I see people forward pieces from the Daily Current, which is spelled Currant,
right.
and they don't necessarily know it's satirical.
I
right?
know,
So
I
there
know.
was a piece that just came out and said something like, Sarah Palin says for immigration, we just should send them all back
Right.
in boats, right? Or whatever. And people were like, is that real?
Well, I know. I find myself as a news guy looking at the people who are reposting those, and desperately trying to be the first one who says that's not real. But you pointed something out earlier that is absolutely true. That a lot of young people are already on top of that, and so I'm not usually the first one who points out that it's not real.
Right. No, because, one of the things that there's been a recent research study that says that the millennial generation has actually got higher functioning brain capacity to handle a barrage of information and sift through and find the important piece. That is just now very exciting to find out. And part of it is because of how they've been trained. These are kids that have always had the internet, right? I mean, I'm old enough to go, I remember back in the day when we sent postcards.
Can I ask you about...
It's not quaint. They don't get it because they have never lived in an era without the internet.
Yeah, right. Sophia, I want to ask you about the reverse effect of this. What I mean by that is this, that if a comedian or satirist makes his living doing this, then everybody gets to know his political persuasion usually. His or her, it's not always a guy, right? But there are certain talk show hosts like David Letterman. I don't know if this applies to Jimmy Fallon as much because he doesn't seem to go in that direction. He doesn't seem to deal with political issues. Mm-hmm. Jay Leno did, though. And I don't know about Jimmy Kimmel either. But I'm wondering about the reverse effect. Somebody who is expected to stay neutral, like David Letterman is expected to stay neutral, but he really doesn't. Does it hurt him if he doesn't try to play, if he's going to pick on the Republicans with a joke, he should pick on the Democrats with another joke? Does it hurt him if he doesn't do that?
That's a really good question. The perception of neutrality. One of the things that we found, there was a study done about 5 years ago, and Jon Stewart was ranked as the number 4 most trusted journalist. in the nation against up next to Anderson Cooper. Now, that is outrageous, right? It's outrageous that his name was even on the list. I mean, Stewart's not a journalist, he's a comedian. Yeah. So the thing is that the viewers of these shows think the satirists, in fact, their only interest is in exposing the truth. And that's what viewers tend to, right after the elections, Stewart did a piece completely going after Nancy Pelosi. He did another piece talking about some of the, ridiculous stuff the Democrats had done during midterm election lead-ups. So they go after the crazy wherever they find it. It just happens to be the case that we're in an odd historical moment where, there may be a perception of an imbalance on that, right? But I think they are, Jon Stewart is clearly somebody who's going to vote Democrat, but not the rest of those guys. It's not always obvious which way they will go. If you watch
No. Johnny Carson was very good at not letting anybody know his political persuasion, and yet he had plenty of satirical jokes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, he was really important in developing the genre for our nation.
When you're teaching your students, do you encourage them to try satire in front of the class to see if it comes natural to them or if they have to force it?
See who's the next one, right?
Well, what they should do is they should practice satirical tweets, okay? Because not everybody can deliver satire, verbally, right? But what we find is that this is a generation of snark and sarcasm and satire. Some of it worries, of course, the older generations because they think it's a sign of disrespect. But I always tell people that you can't express disappointment in a government that's not disappointing. So, the disrespect is from the thing, not from the attitude.
And you know what I always say? I always say I'm glad I live in a country where we are free to pick on whoever is elected because that helps keep everything in balance. If we were all afraid to say anything, then nobody would ever. Then power would be absolute, and that would be the most corrupt government. If it's not,
And no, you're absolutely right. It's part of what makes our nation so great. And satire and comedy were the things that came in after 9/11 to allow a gap for people to talk and be critical and get away with it. Jon Stewart just did a piece on the Chinese government trying to outlaw punning.
Oh my goodness! Sophia,
it would destroy the language.
I love this conversation, but we're so close against the clock. Is Satire Saving Our Nation is the name of the book. Sophia A. McClennen, thank you so much for being on the air. Is the book on Amazon?
Yes, it is.
Go to Amazon, and do you have a website?
I do, SophiaMcClennen.com.
SophiaMcClennen.com. And Robin already has that on our Facebook page and on our site, so go there and check it out. Call us if you need it repeated. Sophia, thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. Protests in New York and other cities last night after a grand jury decision not to charge a white police officer in the chokehold-related death of an unarmed black man. The officer released a statement saying he felt bad about the incident.
Garner's widow rejected that apology and, accompanied by Reverend Al Sharpton, said she will fight to make sure her husband's death will not be in vain.
Like Reverend said, this fight ain't over. It's just begun.
Officer Daniel Pantaleo remains on suspension.
Fox's David Lee Miller. A number of problems caused NASA to cancel this morning's launch of its new Orion spacecraft from Cape Canaveral.
It's the agency's new crew vehicle intended for long-distance, long-duration space flights. That means trips past the moon and onto Mars in the next 20 years or less.
Fox News Radio's Evan Brown, an American healthcare worker possibly infected with Ebola in West Africa, is now being treated at Atlanta's Emory University Hospital. Fox News, we report, you decide.
It's Secret Santa time, and you drew Carl. He loves kitten videos, talking about kittens, and drives a tiny car that looks like one. Carl needs to man up, so get him a quality 7-piece Evercraft combination wrench set at Napa for only $9.99. $9.99 for wrenches to take those ridiculous kitten ears off his car. Hopefully. Conquer the job with Napa Know-How. At participating Napa Auto Parts stores while supplies last. Offer expires 12/31/14.
Geico presents Fan Mail to a Pig.
Dear Maxwell, first off, I really enjoy your commercials about Geico's app. I watch them over and over and over. They make me both laugh and very hungry. Weird. Anyway, I just want to let you know how Geico's new claim status updates on the app really blow me away. Getting those updates makes me think of you. I'd like to thank you in person. Just send me your address. All the best, Big Bad W. Sure thing, Big Bad W. I got a pen. It's 802 Not Gonna Happen Lane.
Claim status updates just a tap away on the Geico app.
Today in Florida Ag News, I'm a Southeast AgNet. While cotton producers continue to work towards growing a good quality crop each year, knowing they are competing against other cotton-growing countries, the real competition continues to be man-made fibers. Vicki Martin, Director of Quality Research and Product Evaluation